What's up, you guys? This is Jay2 back with another video. And in this video today, I'm going to be discussing the truth about the Boston Celtics. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. This season for the Boston Celtics has definitely been a very tough season. To point out first for the Boston Celtics, this team has missed the most time due to COVID protocols, with their star player Jason Tatum missing time, Jaylen Brown, Romeo Langford, so many guys. And you look into the fact too that Kemba Walker pretty much came off the season rehabbing, and he missed pretty much the whole first month of play, and he really hasn't truly been the same since then. He hasn't really been that Kemba Walker that we used to know. And even Marcus Smart missed time with injury as well, but injuries still continue to nag this team. And as we all know, last night, the collision between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, in my opinion, was just like, what in the actual world? Like, how does that even happen? Luckily enough, Jason Tatum seems to be fine, but I don't really know yet about Jaylen Brown, because as we all saw, he was walking on one leg off the basketball court. But looking overall at this season for the Boston Celtics, man, when we look at the Celtics' offensive and defensive rating last season, they were 4th in offensive rating and 4th in defensive rating. This team was one of the best teams overall. I mean, Brad Stevens, during his time even being as the head coach of the Boston Celtics, has definitely established his team as one of the best defensive teams in the entire league. Looking at this season for the Boston Celtics on the defensive end of the basketball court, they are pretty much in the middle of the pack. But, due to miscommunications and so many different lineups that the Celtics have had this season, they have not really been the most consistent basketball team, especially on the defensive end of the basketball court, but as well as on the offensive end of the basketball court. Marcus Smart has made definitely many questionable decisions if you see him play throughout the season. Jason Tatum has definitely made some questionable calls as well throughout the season, despite him having some pretty good success throughout the NBA season. But one thing to point out as well, the Celtics, they have definitely been one of the most heaviest isolation teams. Jason Tatum is the guy who has the ball most in his hands, especially in isolation plays for the Boston Celtics. But the Celtics' points per play on isolation possessions this season ranks 20th in the entire NBA. And they haven't been really efficient on these plays as well. And the Celtics don't have a single player that ranks above the 43rd percentile in isolation efficiency this season as well. But yes, the Celtics have not been a really good isolation team. Not only that, but the Celtics, they have been one of the worst perimeter defending teams in the NBA this season as well. And they're letting teams shoot over 37 threes per game. When you look at last season when they had Gordon Hayward on the team, that's really a big thing that what many people have been saying about why the Celtics are so, bad this season. It's because of not having Gordon Hayward anymore on the team. And that actually is true, because Gordon Hayward was a really big presence for this team when it came to, giving Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown a break from the scoring load at times, and giving the opportunity to Gordon Hayward to go out and get buckets as well. If you see what Gordon Hayward is doing right now on the Hornets, it's pretty clear, in my opinion, that Gordon Hayward still had that level of play left in him. It was just up to him to go out and prove it to people that he can still play at a high level, and that's what he's been doing this season for the Hornets. Meanwhile, for the Celtics, they have definitely missed the presence of Gordon Hayward. Not only that, but the Celtics, when they acquired Tristan Thompson on the team, and he hasn't really been a good piece for this team overall. He doesn't really fit their system and what they play in. As well as Daniel Theis, he hasn't really been the best player for the Celtics as well. Frontcourt pairing has been very, mediocre this season for the Celtics. Really, ever really since losing Al Horford to begin with, their presence on that end hasn't really been good at all. Luckily enough, though, for them, they have another really good player on this team at Robert Williams, who really has that potential to grow into a tremendous talent for this team, especially when you look at the defensive presence that he can provide with his high vertical and his incredibly long wingspan. The guy definitely has a lot of potential, but the problem with him as well is that he's pretty undersized at the center position to begin with. They haven't really been utilizing him as much this season. He's really only started in about 11 games overall this season to begin with for the Celtics. Luckily enough for him, he's definitely still has a lot of potential to grow, because he's a very young player and he has time. Over the past few years now with these Boston Celtics team, they really haven't lived up to the expectation that has been placed on them. If we all remember and we recall of the team with Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, all those guys were considered like a mini, big five. I remember when obviously Gordon Hayward, he had got hurt in the first game of the season, which really dwindled their chances of really competing out again for an NBA championship. But they were still a really good team. But they had a lot of problems in the locker room, and they really never truly had that chemistry on the basketball court. Last season, this team made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals because of the play of their core players. But looking at the Celtics this season, they really don't have that core for this team. The two guys who they mainly rely on this season to begin with is Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Kemba Walker hasn't really been Kemba Walker. And when we look at Evan Fournier and the acquisition of him, he hasn't really been playing in any of the Celtics games this season, but he had a good game the other night, which kind of just showed a glimpse of the potential that he can have for this Boston Celtics team when he's fully 100% ready. He can be a huge perimeter threat who's another guy who can help space out the floor for this Boston Celtics team. But on the defensive end of the basketball court, he's not really the greatest defender as either like how they had Gordon Hayward, but he can still be a pretty decent level defender for this team. That's the potential that he should be. For right now, all I'm saying is that the Celtics, they need a wing player. They need a really solid level wing player to really help this team and to give a break off of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown at times, because right now this team isn't really that good. And we look at their front court pairing, as I said before, of Tristan Thompson and Daniel Theis. This team is not really that good. And not only that, but their bench production is not even that good either. They have a bunch of young, solid players on this team, especially, as I said before, in Robert Williams, who has the potential to still grow into a really good piece for this team. But overall, looking at this team right now, this Celtics team isn't really going anywhere this season. And Danny Ainge has already said it himself that this team is not a team that's really built for competing for an NBA championship. And there could be a solid case that the Celtics could possibly make it to the second round of the playoffs this season, but they're going to be in that play-in tournament as well. And we will see what happens with the Celtics. But overall, as well, I want to point out too about people especially saying that, Brad Stevens should be fired. It's not really his fault what's happening with the Celtics team. If you've seen his resume and what he's been doing for the Celtics team, we all know that he is not really the problem. It is just the roster that he have right now on this team. That's the problem. It happens a lot. In some cases, it could be true for head coaches who get fired, that it can't be their fault, and you see the next guy come in and really help this team get better. But there can be a lot of times as well that it's really not the coach's fault. It's more so the owner and the general manager's fault for really establishing this team as not really a good team with the pieces they have around them. But yeah, this season for the Boston Celtics has been very inconsistent with play. It hasn't really been a good year at all, especially with health issues and things like that. Maybe next year will be the Celtics' year, and 9 times out of 10 it will be. They're going to have a much better season next year than this year. It's just not really been a year. But on the positive notes, there's been definitely massive improvements for Jason Tatum and his offensive play and just in general, as well as Jaylen Brown really officially establishing himself as that all-star level player next to Jason Tatum. But hopefully we'll see what the Celtics do, especially in the offseason this year. Don't be surprised when you see new acquisitions placed on this roster as well to really help this team take on a new level. But I hope you guys enjoyed this brief video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more basketball content each and every week. Have a good day. Peace.